Ladies and gentlemen, this is the state of the scene.
Sleep Token signed to major label RCA Records. The band will leave behind Spine Farm Records, a subsidiary of Universal Music Group, which was the home for all three of their full-length albums up until now. They joined the ranks of other rock and metal artists on the label, inclusive of Foo Fighters, Cage the Elephant, Tool, and 3 Days Grace, as well as other massive artists from the likes of Childish Gambino, Britney Spears, and a tease to G-Eazy and Doja Cat. Sleep Token also joined the ranks of other artists in our scene, having made the jump to a major label while experiencing rising success in their careers, including Avenged Sevenfold, Bring Me the Horizon, and the Maine. Now,
80s.
I wanted to speak a little bit about other bands who have made this transition and what it looked like for them, because a lot of people have had a lot of strong feelings about the fact that Sleep Token have signed to a major label. So let's start with the Maine. They released one album through Warner Brothers, Marcos, 2010's Black and White, before leaving the label for reasons which Substream magazine summed up as Warner Brothers forcing them to do co-writes, getting heavily involved in the process, and not following through on promised radio campaigns to get the band in front of a larger audience. That album, Black and White, did go on to sell 22K copies, the band's highest performing album to date. Their follow-up, Pioneer, independently released through the band's own label, would do album sales equaling slightly over half of the prior release. The band has released 6 additional albums since, though, all independently, as well under the band's own 8123 label. The Maine essentially have gone on to be successful, but not under the umbrella of a major label. Let's turn our attention to Avenged Sevenfold, who signed to Warner Brothers Records, releasing their self-titled album through the label alongside Hopeless Records, as well as Nightmare and Hail to the King, strictly through Warner Brothers. They then left the label unhappy with their current deal, citing California Labor Code Section 2855, which applies a 7-year limit to the enforceability of personal service contracts, which later led to Warner Brothers Records suing the band under the pretense that they were owed financial compensation for the remaining albums Avenged Sevenfold agreed to release to the label. Just one, I believe. While Avenged Sevenfold actually went, while this was all happening, and signed a short-term deal with Capitol Records and released one album, The Stage, with that label before inevitably returning to Warner Brothers Records after they restructured their deal. The band has seen incredible commercial success distributing their albums through the major label system, with all 3 of their first releases on Warner Brothers Records having since exceeded 1 million units sold, though ironically, their Hopeless Records release, City of Evil, remains the band's highest-selling record to date. Bring Me the Horizon signed to Columbia Records in 2015 for U.S. distribution, leaving their home at the time of Epitaph Records, and RCA Records in 2012 for worldwide distribution outside of the U.S. They've gone on to release 3 full-length records since, as well as their most recent Post-Human Survival horror EP, and the upcoming, as of yet, undated next gen EP. The band saw their first #1 record in the UK under the major label system, 2019's Ammo, as well as their best-selling record of all time, that's The Spirit, which has since surpassed 1 million records sold. Marcos, so earlier in the episode, Andrew stated, I think Sleep Token is poised to get even bigger by signing to a major label. Marcos, that seems inevitable. The question is, what kind of experience will they ultimately have?
Right. Will they have the experience?
What will the critical reception be? What will the fan reception be? And will it be a fruitful and long career, or will it be a one and out? I didn't mention, another great example of this is Nothing Nowhere, who released 2 records on Fueled by Ramen and has now since gone independent.
No, well, we see the major label flame out or burnout happen on a frequent enough basis. We saw it with All Time Low and Dirty Talk, I think.
Yeah.
At the time, we saw it with
Dirty Talk doesn't sound right. It feels like it's something else, but maybe it was Dirty Talk.
Dirty Bomb is the Grayscale song.
Yeah, and there is a song called Time Bomb on the album. Dirty Work.
Dirty Work. And that album sucked. So there's that. I hated that album. That was one of the worst albums. I don't think I ever bought it. Fortunately, I didn't.
That
type
for
thing.
me felt like my first time really experiencing my band signed to a major label and now they're bad. So it's like,
No,
in
no, no,
ways,
we saw
I
Escape
still
the Fate.
experience a level of like PTSD. That's like, I see a signing like this. And like a lot of people in the comments when I shared this story, I like had that moment where I too went, is this the right move?
It's so hard to say because Sleep Token are such a their music spans so many different genres. So it's like if they release like a pop song, it's not the end of the world because they've done that already a whole bunch of times. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure. This is not an instance where you go, okay, this band might not be as heavy. That would align with them. But that's not the issue people had with All Time Low. It's not the issue that people had with the Maine. Both bands that like released a major label album just felt distinctively different with this release in a way that did not resonate with people.
Yeah.
And that can be the fear with a band like Sleep Token, is that make what you will of something like this. You in your mind, maybe to you see something like this and you're like, hey, maybe that doesn't really mean anything. You know, maybe they've just got more money to distribute more records, to you know, like work with different producers, to like make music videos like for bigger budgets, like all of this other stuff. But there have been multiple examples in this scene where bands have genuinely changed their sound in a way that like, sometimes it's the band's choice. Sometimes it feels like label intervention, but it is not necessarily reflected in what fans have wanted from the artist.
Escape the Fate is another example. And that's how you see a lot of these like breakdown. Like the Maine, we talked about how there were contractual obligations from like on behalf of the label that it didn't seem like they met, you know, as far as like radio campaigns and stuff like that. And I remember Escape the Fate, one of the reasons that they were unhappy with their signing with that label is they got to that team, but since it's they signed, they had this marketing team around them, but because music, you know, the industry is so fickle, people left, people got fired, whatever, and suddenly they were left without a team and a label that didn't even end up really liking them because there was like different leadership in charge and stuff like that. So
interestingly, there was
didn't know what to
quotes
do with the band
from M. Shadows, the vocalist of Avenged Sevenfold, who said that their relationship had grown contentious with Warner Brother Records in part because they felt like when they went and presented new music to them that there was disinterest from everyone who was currently working with the band. So the fact that they went back and restructured was heavily based on the fact that there were different people at the helm when they went back and reworked their deal than the ones they had been working with in the past.
Right.
And you can imagine that in a way that might disillusion a band who's like trying to present themselves and trying to maybe align themselves with what they think the label's vision is and get them to understand like how to best market the band. But if there's a disconnect there, if like they don't understand, then it can be detrimental to like the overall experience, the rollout, everything. Do you feel like this is the right move for Sleep Token? If you were to fully armchair quarterback the situation, do you think they needed to make this deal? Do you think it's
Yeah, I do. I think they have outgrown Spine Farm Records in a way that this deal really like it proves.
So you're saying just fiscally they need the backing of someone who can, you know, be there for a band who is clearly over-indexed by a wide margin
to some degree,
their popularity to their current label like divide.
I think I feel like you need to do this signing because of how still unpredictable their rise has been. Like, I feel like you need someone to help you navigate that in a sense. But
the counter
yes,
argument
there
would
can
be
that
they've accomplished all of this without the help of a major label. So it almost says to you, what
Spine
does a
Farm's not
major
small
label...
though by any means. I mean, granted, some of that might be me looking at Sleep Token on this label for the
Spine
past
Farm
couple
is like a
years.
subsidiary of Universal Music
Sure.
Group. So it's like there are aspects of them that are covered by like a larger label. Though it is interesting that Sleep Token would choose to walk away and go with an entirely different company than instead sort of move up the food chain.
What does Sleep Token get out of this? It's just that they can
Theoretically,
get bigger,
financial
right?
backing, that's what you get, right?
Sure.
And in theory, maybe it opens doors for them they didn't have in the past. Opportunities to work with certain producers, opportunities to work with certain artists, opportunities to maybe play festivals that otherwise they would have a hard time getting their foot in the door with, Rock and metal festivals have
Coachella.
come easy, but you're right. Like, is it more difficult to get into like a Boston Calling? Is it more difficult to get into a Lollapalooza? Based on what some of the things we've seen, I would say no, that all these things feel like they're within reason, but maybe they become easier with the backing of a major label.
A question I have for you is, obviously there was always a level of uncertainty when you saw someone like the Maine or someone like All Time Low, Escape the Fates sign with a major label. Do you have that now? Like, you personally, do you have that nowadays? I saw the sign and I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Sleep Token's one of the biggest bands in the world right now. For me anyway, it seems like, yeah, it makes perfect sense to go sign with a bigger label. And I think I am personally less scared about that risk nowadays because I think I've seen a lot of bands bounce back from it when it inevitably or does go poorly, like,
I mean, that feels like a real backhanded sort of compliment, though, like a real silver lining to an otherwise like bad
Yes.
situation. Essentially what you're saying is, hey, even if it does go to shit, like they'll be okay. Like the Maine.
And I'm not saying I expect it to go to shit. It's more one of those things where I'm like, well, if it doesn't work out, it's probably not the end of Sleep Token.
I guess there's just an inherent fear into me that no matter how badly I want to trust that things will be okay, the higher up you get in the food chain, the more critical it is that you return the investment. So where I think there's maybe more patience with smaller labels and more of an opportunity to grow, which, to be fair, Sleep Token has gone through those channels already. They're 3 albums deep. Yeah. They've like put in the work. Like this is almost a reward for them in theory, but it's hard for me still not to feel like, is a corporation of this size going to understand Sleep Token in the same way that's like, even at like one level below that, does it feel like Fueled by Ramen understood what to do with Nothing Nowhere? Did it feel like Fueled by Ramen understood what to do with A Day to Remember? Did it feel like, it certainly didn't, did it feel like Fueled by Ramen understood what to do with Against the Current, who left that label and had not a lot of good things to say about them? So like, I feel like we have a lot of these immediate examples of like bands stepping up to like the next level and then like immediately not being like they just like they're mismanaged. Like, it's just like at that level, they lose like this sort of aspect of the culture that they like carried with them, and they're treated like more of a commodity and then spit out when it doesn't work out. So like,
no, I know what you mean.
I don't know. Does Sleep Token actually, yes, get sort of like thrown on some tours that don't make any fucking sense? They put out like maybe one song? Do they work with a producer that like the label feels very strongly about? Does Sleep Token make choices that they think will be beneficial for their relationship with a label without even like really realizing that they're doing it? Like, I don't know. I just know that the dynamic has to change because aspects of your like investments have changed, right?
The
like
thing
you're
that kills
in
me, the thing that would kill me is compromising the integrity of what Sleep Token was built upon in the anonymity. And I know that like bands in the past, like, everyone's always going to mention Slipknot, built on anonymity until, maybe you signed with a major label, or I don't know when that band did. I don't really know.
To be
their
fair, I think
timeline
Slipknot
off the top
was
of my head.
almost major label from the jump.
Sure. Right. So like, to me, this is a failure if we learn their identities because they do like a whole unmasking as a result. Like, this is not a failure to me if by the end of it, like 3 years from now, we still have the masks or like stuff like that, like.
Can you wrap your head around the idea that Sleep Token could become as common a household name as label mates like Tool or Foo Fighters or even 3 Days Grace?
Yes, and it's still so fucked to think about.
Like Sleep Token could be a band who's considered in the same breath as like a Tool, like kind of experimental, kind of weird, but somehow manages to have this massive crossover appeal.
I don't mean this in like a gatekeepy way, but it's like, this is what I always, when we talk about bands on the show, this is the end that I always wish all of them get to. It's like this list level where you're feasibly like talking about how this band could be a household name. And like, I still pinch myself with this one because I can't believe we ever even got to a point with any of these bands.